Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and in this installment in my Old Norse lesson series, you're going to get some pretty much vocabulary lesson because this is vocabulary that doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with each other, but also wouldn't necessarily have a lot to do with any other vocabulary I could lump it together with. It's just stuff that you need to know for reading, and once you learn this vocabulary, your reading will take a big step up. So the first one of these words I want to look at is heita, which means to be named, to be called. This verb is a little bit peculiar. In its present tense, its endings make it look like an I-type weak verb, but in its past tense, you see that what it really is a class 7 strong verb. Now, the reason why it has such unusual endings in the present is that it is the single remnant in Old Norse of what were once the passive tense endings in strong verbs. Now, the reason why that is that it is essentially a passive verb. In the present tense, you can read it as am name, are name, is name. Let me give you the endings and I'll give you some examples. So, the present tense, ek heiti, thu heitir, han heitir, ver heitum, their heitid, their heita. Like I said, it looks like an I-type weak verb. But what that means is I am named, you are named, he is named, we are named, y'all are named, they are named. So you'll see this verb all the time. If you were to introduce yourself in Old Norse, I would say, for example, ek heiti Jackson. But of course, in reading, you're mostly going to see this in third person, where you're going to read about somebody who heitir Olavur, a woman who heitir Guthrader, etc. And then in the past tense, this is just going to have normal strong verb past tense endings, and it is technically a class 7, so the singular and plural have the same form of the root. It's het, with a long e. So ek het, thu het, han het, ver hetum, their hetuth, and their hetu. So of course, the form you're going to see most often is the third person singular, because you're going to read in some saga, or what have you, that, han het Sigurður, or hon het Gudrun, or what have you. You're going to see heitir, het all the time when characters are introduced in a saga, or other narrative in Old Norse. Now, the past participle, by the way, is heitin, hated, so han hefur heitið would be he has been named. Just remember that it is basically inherently passive in sense. If you speak German, this is not too unfamiliar to you, nor is it unfamiliar to you from the modern Scandinavian languages. And there's even an older modern English cognate to this, heit, a man heit, Thomas or what have you. Now, one thing to point out is that heita is applicable to first names. So a man heitir, Ragnar, but to indicate somebody's quote-unquote last name, their patronym, right? Somebody is so-and-so's son, so-and-so's daughter. You actually don't say heita for that, you just say that they are so-and-so's son. So when you ask somebody, what heitir thu, the response is their first name, ek heiti Sigurður. But then to get the answer to get their last name, what you're actually asking them is, hvers sonur ertu? Whose son are you? Ek em Sigmund's son. Ek em Sigmund's dóttir. Right, so keep that in mind, kind of an interesting peculiarity. The heita question gets the heita answer, and the heita answer is the first name, not somebody's quote-unquote last name or patronym. Also, keep in mind that heita can also be a normal-looking strong verb with present singular endings ek heit, thu heiter, han heiter. But that doesn't mean named, that means promise. So ek heit is I promise, ek heiti is I am named. But the past tense and the past participle look the same. All right. Another verb that kind of stands on its own, although not as much, but you also just need to know for your vocabulary, is the basic verb for to do, and that is gera. Now, there is also a regional form, gera, that tends to get more, you're going to see that more as you go east. In Old West Norse, so in Old Icelandic, you're mostly going to see gera. You will see gera, however, occasionally, especially in archaic texts that may have all kinds of regional origins. There is even an even more archaic form, gurva, which you're likely to see, for example, on runic inscriptions and in particularly archaic texts. So this is just an I-type weak verb. You just have to know that there are these regional forms so you're not surprised by them. So in your typical sort of old Icelandic forms, you're going to see, for example, ek geri, thu gerir, han gerir, ver gerum, their gerið, and their gera. Past tense, ek gerða, thu gerðir, hann gerði, ver gerðum, their gerðuð, and their gerðu. However, in the past tense, you might also see those other forms like gurða, and then you will sometimes see, but again, this is more in the eastern area, gorða. And that helps explain some of the variation you're going to see between Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, etc. today. And then the past participle is gerðr, gert, gurður, gert, or, and this is actually pretty common even in the West, in Iceland, gorður, gort. So watch out for those various forms. And that gives you your very common verb, gera, do. Then another verb that's kind of its own thing in some ways that I want to talk to you about is vilja, which means want. This is not used as a future tense maker in Old Norse like it is in English. It means want. So in the present tense, this is going to look a little bit like a strong verb, although it is technically not. So you get ek vil, thu vil, that's two L's. Notice that's because of R assimilation. In modern Icelandic, that's thu vilt, because this has been sort of analogized in people's minds to the forms of strong verbs. And you will even see vilt in some very archaic texts, including Hávamál, although Hávamál also has vil with two L's. Han vil with two L's, again, R assimilation. Ver viljum, because the J is part of the root, but it's only going to appear before endings that start U or A. It's going to disappear when it would be word final or before an R or an I. So ver viljum, their vilið, and their vilja. And then past tense, this is where you see that it's actually a weak verb, ek vilda, thu vildir, han vildi, ver vildum, their vilduð, their vildu. And then the past participle, which you'll hardly ever see, viljaðir, viljat. Now, this verb is used modally like present verbs. It tends to get analogized to present verbs in the history of Germanic languages like English and Scandinavian. And so being used modally means you use it with the infinitive of another verb, but without the infinitive marker at. So ek vil gera, I will do. Ek vil heita, I will be named. I want to be named, I want to do. Okay, just keep in mind that it has that distinct sense of want, of desire, not of actual just plain future tense. The actual plain future tense is Old Norse munu, one of the present verbs. All right, so there's three very critical verbs that I wanted to introduce to you in this chapter of our Old Norse lessons. After a brief word from my sponsor, I'm going to give you some more vocabulary that I want you to learn as we move forward with learning Old Norse. All right, so the next thing I want you to learn is O. That's it, just O, long O. This is un in Old Norse. So you can add it to pretty much anything to make it the opposite, right? So vinner in Old Norse is friend, ovinner is enemy, okay? Sat is agreement, treaty, peace. Osat is discord, dispute, war between parties. So O is used both to mean just un, right? So you can use it on an adjective. Cold is colder. O colder would be like uncold, right? And you can use it to make pretty much opposite lexical items like vinner, friend, O vinner, enemy. Now, O, long O, is the typical form in Old Icelandic. However, outside of Iceland, you will see both the variants long U and long O, and this is not really cleanly split between West and East like so many dialect things are in Old Norse. For example, you'll tend to see long U more in Norway and Denmark, and then long O more in Sweden and Iceland. Unfortunately, if you're using the most comprehensive dictionary of Old Norse, Cleesby Vigfússon's Icelandic English Dictionary, Guðrandi Vigfússon had kind of a, I think I've mentioned this before, just an affinity for more archaic language in both English and Old Norse. I mean, some of the definitions in the Cleesby Vigfússon Dictionary are hilariously archaic English. You know, spear for ask. And more maids than you'll find in all the mansions of Beverly Hills because, you know, the word girl is never used, it's always maid. Anyway, but one of the archaic Old Norse things that Guðrandi Vigfússon favored was the U prefix for un instead of O. He decided that was more archaic. So even though you'll actually find long O in any text in Old Icelandic, and the Guðrandi Vigfússon dictionary, you have to always remember to look up long U because Guðrandi Vigfússon insisted on it. But learn it as long O because that's what you're going to actually see as you're reading. Another one is sem. Now, sem means as, or you can often translate it like in the way that we use like in English. But let me give you some sentences to give you a sense of what I mean by as. So she sat there, sem olft og boru, as or like a swan on a wave. Gangi yður svo sem ek hygg. May it go with y'all so as I think, right? As I think it will. May it go with y'all in the way that I believe it will. Mer synisk sem hans ost se ther guli betri. It seems to me as though his love is better to you than gold. So it's as, it's like, it's as if, it's as though, but these are adverbial uses, right? So as or like on the clause level, not on the single word level. Now there is also, and this will be part of your vocabulary for this lesson too, there's also the adjective like, líkar. In very archaic texts, you'll sometimes see líkar, but that's used adjectively, right, word to word. So han líkar mér, he is like me, right? You're comparing two nouns or two adjectives. Sem compares two whole clauses or two verbs, right? So han gerir sem han gerir, he does like he does, or as he does. It's as or like. I always seem like I can explain these things better in writing, so no doubt I'll have some stuff on a slide here that will explain it better than I'm explaining it to you right now as I stand here in the forest. All right, some other things. Learn lígar. This is another adjective thing. This is an adjective suffix that basically just turns anything into an adjective. So you got drengr, which is like badass in Old Norse. Drengeliger is bad, badass is an adjective. So a man is a drengr, but you can also call him a drengeliger maður. So liger can be added to pretty much anything to make it an adjective. Then I want to tell you about the I stem nouns in the masculine gender. Most of the new nouns that I've mentioned here in this lesson, vinner, friend, and drengr, a badass, a man who lives up to the Norse code of reckless courage. These are I stem masculines. They don't work quite like your typical masculine nouns, which are typical masculine strong nouns, which are A stems. So your typical type is vinner, friend, and so this will go vinner, vin, vinar, vin. Notice I stems typically don't have a dative ending, and their genitive ending looks more like the feminine genitive ending. It's ar rather than s. So vinner, vin, vinar, vin, and then vinir, vini, vina, vinum. So you got the nominative plural ending ir and the accusative plural ending e. Now, the typical masculine strong verbs like, what example did I originally give you? Elder, fire. Those have nominative plural ending ar and accusative plural ending a, and those are called A stems or a stems. So these are the I stems where you've got ir and e instead of ar and a. There's not a ton of them, but some of them are very common words. So learn these: vinner, friend, huger, thought, often used as the closest thing in Old Norse, thing like soul or your internal experience. Hlutur, which just means a thing, and drengr, a badass, someone who lives up to the Norse code of reckless courage. Let me give you a couple other assorted words. Ev means if. Síðan means since or later. And then there are some adverbs that I want you to learn. Ut, upp, in, niður, which means out, up, in, and down. But as directions, you fara upp, or ut, or in, or niður. If you are out, or up, or in, side, or down, you are uti, uppi, inni, nidri. So to go in these directions, when you're actually moving, it's you go ut, or go up, or go in, or go neither. But if you are outside, or inside, or up, or down, you are uti, or inni, or nidri, or uppi. All right, and then let me give you a couple more nouns of the typical strong noun types for you to learn. Learn konungur, which means king, that's a masculine. Learn von, which is hope or expectation, that's a feminine. Gjöf, which means gift, another feminine. And then a bunch of strong neuter nouns that you'll see often. Barn means child. Land means land. Gul means gold. Råd means counsel or advice. Liv means life. And sverð means sword. Now you've got a big, powerful vocabulary update that's going to help you read a lot more stuff. The grammar for heita and the I stems is a little bit new, but nothing I think that'll daunt you too much after all the stuff you've learned in previous lessons. And I'm going to give you some exercises readings at the end here, and maybe some additional notes for stuff that I explain better in writing than in speech. And hopefully that'll help you out, and you'll keep moving forward in your readings, and before long be picking up things on your own to read as you expand your vocabulary with your own studies. So for now, thanks for following along. Thanks especially to the Patreon supporters who keep this series going. And from beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best.